Tutorial, I'll be going over how to create jQuery methods or using jQuery methods in our JavaScript as we are implementing and modifying different elements on our HTML page. So to first get started, I want you to open up a blank HTML file inside your code editor. And since we're going to be using jQuery, we want to get access to the jQuery library. So to do that, I want you to go to your browser and I want you to type in jQuery CDN. Alright, and if we go to Hosted Libraries by Google Developers, Google hosts a number of different libraries that we can just link to, and it gives us access to everything that we need. So let's find the version that we want. So let's type in jQuery. Alright, and this looks like a nice jQuery library, so we'll just paste this in. Alright, so you want to make sure it says jQuery.min.js. That means that you have the jQuery library that's on here. There's a bunch of other libraries on this page, so make sure you grab the one that you want. Now this is probably the latest version of jQuery. Has a lot of great features. So I've got that pasted in. Alright, now what we want to do is we want to save this document right here. So I'm just going to go to my desktop. I have a folder that I have created that I've called tutorials, and I'm just going to type in jQuery-methods. Okay, now that I have this saved, in this particular code editor, I can just grab this URL path right here, and I can paste it right here, and it gives me access to anything that I write in my browser. Now I recommend using Firefox for previewing your code, because you can just paste in the path that's directly on your machine in your browser and it will load it. Alright, so I'm going to call this jQuery methods. Save that, and if we refresh this, then the tab right here now says jQuery methods. So this shows that these two are linked together, so it's awesome. So next what we want to do is we are going to set up our HTML. So we're just going to set up a button. And for the text that's between these two button tags, we're just going to put in button 1. So we save it, refresh the page, we've just got button 1 that we can click on, doesn't do anything. Alright, next what we want to do is we want to go inside our head tag. So right underneath our jQuery library that we've already inserted into the page, we're going to type in script, and then our closing script tag. And we're going to do function animate this. So we're going to do our two parentheses here. If you're not familiar with functions, make sure to watch my previous tutorial on how to write functions. And then we're going to go here and we're going to do onClick equals animate this with our two parentheses. So this is how we call a function. Alright, and we are going to do an alert. Just type in, do our two single quotes here. It says that we're going to be typing in a string, and we're just going to type in hello world. Press the page, click here. Alright, so the function that we have created is working. So next what we want to do is we want to actually start setting up some jQuery methods. Now jQuery methods can be extremely useful. They can do all sorts of stuff. They can create animations, they can fade things in, fade them back out. I have a list of a few very handy ones right here where you can toggle content, you can show it, you can hide it, you can animate all sorts of different things that you want to do. So for this, to declare our jQuery, we're going to do a $sign. $sign represents jQuery. We're going to do our 2 parentheses, and inside the parentheses we're going to specify our selector. Now when I say selector, I'm referring to pretty much any HTML tag that is on your page. You can select that with jQuery and you can modify it however you like. Now in this instance I have a button tag on here, so I'm just going to type in button. Now technically, if I have multiple buttons on the page, then this will affect all of those buttons. So you want to be very careful with the way you select things. If you want things to select a specific element, then you can set up an ID or a class, and then it will only specifically modify those elements. But in this case, we're just going to put in the button tag. Alright, now we're going to do add class. Now add class, this means we're going to add a class onto the button when we click on it, and then we're going to set up some CSS formatting that will modify it however we like. Alright, so we're going to create a class called format btn for a format button. Okay. And we're going to declare our style tags, writing some CSS. Now whenever you're going to be writing CSS, or even a class to be specific, you want to do a period, and then in this case format btn. So we're pretty much typing exactly what we wrote here, right here. And the period right here represents a class. Now a class is when you put in something like this in your HTML. So you got class format btn. So that is a class. Alright. Now, classes allow you to start formatting your HTML however you would like, and they can be extremely useful because you can use them over and over again in your HTML. So instead of having to write formatting for each and every HTML tag on your document, you can create it just once in your CSS and then use it for each and every button you want it to affect. Alright, so I'm going to do a padding of 5px by 10px. I'm going to do a border of 1px solid CCC, a background of FFF, which is white, and we'll do a color of, we'll just type in green. Okay. So if we refresh the page, we now have this button that looks like this. So it's kind of a squarish button, it's got some green text. This is all the formatting that we have applied to that button. Now if I click on it, it doesn't really do anything. Alright, I'm going to make that button a little bit bigger, so I'm going to do a font-size of 20px. And then I'm going to curve the edges a little bit, so I'm going to do a border-radius of 5px. Alright, so now the button's a bit bigger, and I'm going to just add in a little hover effect to it. So I'm going to do format btn : hover. Now the hover here allows us to add in a hover effect when we hover over things. And so I'm going to do a background of green, color of FFF, so making the font color white, and the border dash color, we're going to set that to green as well. Alright, so we'll save it, refresh it, we hover over it, now it turns into a green button when we hover over it. Now I notice that when we hover over this button, the cursor still looks like a cursor, it doesn't look like a pointer, so we're going to make a quick change there. We're going to go here, we're going to do cursor : pointer, so refresh it, and now we get this little hand icon represents, hey, we can click on this, it will do something. And now, right now when we hover over it, it's just an instant transition. I want to make it a little bit more of a fun transition, so I'm going to do transition : 0.5s, or I'm going to specify all, 0.5 SEs. Now this will select any statement that we've specified in our hover effect, and it will apply it here. So now if I hover over it, it does this nice transition. Alright, so now we've got the formatting for this button set up. Now, if we click on it, it's not going to do anything, even though we've set up our function, because it's adding in a class that we have already specified here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to delete this completely. So we're going to save it, refresh the page, and now the button goes back into its previous state. So this is what a button looks like normally, and we have no formatting on it because all the formatting is on this class called format button. But when we click on this now, it now turns into the button that we had formatted because it added this class, format button. Now, normally speaking, I'd probably want the button formatted before I clicked on it. So I'm going to add that class back in. So I'm going to have class equals format button, and we're going to have this animate this function do something different. So I'm going to set it up so we do a dot animate, our two parentheses, and then our two curly brackets. Now this allows us, now make sure you have your semicolon at the end of your function, and we'll also need to specify a length for our animation. So that's why we're going to do a comma right after the curly bracket here, and we're going to put in 1000. Now 1000 represents 1 second. If you do 500, that is a half a second. Now the reason why 1000 represents 1 second is in JavaScript, measurements are measured in increments of milliseconds. So 1000 milliseconds equals 1 second. So this right here is 1 second for our animation to complete. Now what we're going to do is we are going to do a margin dash left colon, and we'll say 50px. Alright, so we save it, refresh the page, we click on it, and now it takes 1 second for it to move over. Now I'm going to just make that movement a little bit more obvious. So I'm going to do, let's do 200, and we'll save that. We'll click on it. Alright, so that was 1000, or 1 second to complete that. Now I'm going to change our animation speed to 500 so it takes a half second to complete. Now this right here seems to be a bit choppy. Now it might be based off the jQuery version that we're using. It may not be fully supported, so I'm actually going to take this to 172. And let's see if that enhances that animation a little bit better. Alright, it seems to be working a little better. Okay, so we're just going to keep that at 172 here. Alright, and let's do a few other formatting on it. So we're going to do comma, and let's do a padding. We'll go outside the single quotes, and then we'll add in 2 single quotes, and we're going to change the padding to 20, or 10px, 20px. So now we've specified 2 things that are going to change in an animation type way. So we click on it. So it's going to get bigger as it moves over. Now we can really specify just about any CSS statement in here and it will animate it. Now within reason, there's a few things that don't work very well. Like if you wanted to change your font from one font to another, it's probably not going to work so well because there really isn't much of a transition. It would just go from one font to the other. But for things like if you're going to be moving things around, if you're going to be making things bigger, if you want to change the font size, etc., you can use the animate function for that, or the animate method. And you can specify the length of the animation right here. You can do all sorts of fun stuff. Now, right now we have it set up so that it will move over by 200, but then once that's done, it doesn't actually do anything because it's already moved to the left by 200. But what if we wanted to set it up so that it will keep on adding upon itself? So let's do a plus equals and now every time we click on this, so I'm just going to expand this a little bit, it's going to move over by 200. So by doing a plus equals, it is adding 200 every time that we click on it. Now if we select minus, same functionality, except this time it's going to subtract 200. And in that instance, it will go off the page, and we don't see anything. Now, if you watched my previous function tutorial, I covered how to create functions, but there's one part that I didn't cover too much, and that is how to use the statement this. Now, this allows us to pass in everything that is on this button right here. So and when I say this, I mean literally you type in this. So we pass in this. I'm going to go up to this function. I'm going to type in data, and that passes in everything for this button. Now right now we don't have too much on this button, to be honest, but we're going to change that in a moment. So now right now our selector is set up for button. So every time we click on any button, it will move over to the side. And to give you an example of this, I'm just going to grab this HTML code, copy it, and I'm going to paste it a few different times. So, okay, save it. Alright, so we've got a button here, so I click on this, and they all move over. You see how they all happened? It wasn't based off the one that I clicked, it's just if I click on any button, they will all get selected because we've using the button selector. They'll all move over to the left, or they'll get a margin dash left of plus 200, and then the padding will go by 10px by 20px. Now, what if I only wanted it to modify the specific button that I'm clicking on? Well, that's when you would use this. So instead of doing our selector as button, I can now type in data. Now, the reason I'm using data here is because that's the variable that I've declared here, and the data here represents the this value that we've passed through. Now remember, the this value represents the HTML element that is being clicked on. In this instance, that is the button. So by passing the data, or the this to this, or we can refresh it. Now I can click on button, and only this one moves over and gets bigger. I click on this one moves over and gets bigger, etc. Now the reason why this one's moving over as I'm clicking on this is because this one is relative to the position of this one right here. Okay. Now a few other examples on how to do this. So we're going to just comment out this code that we've written, so you still have it for future reference, but we're no longer going to be using that functionality. So we're going to go to the next line, and in this case, let's do let's pass in, or let's create some custom attributes. Now, HTML attributes allow you to pass in kind of variables. In the past, developers have passed in hidden variables through like hidden input fields, etc. It's a way to store data on a page, but it can get kind of bulky. It's kind of an older way of doing things. But with HTML5, we can start passing in variables or having variables stored directly on an HTML tag. Now an example of this is I can do data dash, and then I can create pretty much any type of attribute name that I want to create. And so I'm just going to do BG. So data dash BG. Now BG represents, at least for me personally, is background. And then equals, and there are two quotes. Now if you look at it, it's an exact same format as our class equals format button. Class is just another attribute on an HTML tag, just like this right here. And now this, I can just pass in any type of data that I want. For this case, I'm going to do hashtag 000, which means black. And then I'm going to do data dash color, or let's do data dash font. And we want the font color to be, let's type in purple. Alright, so the question is, how am I going to use this data that has been clicked on this button? So we've already got the animate this function set up, so we're specifying this, so technically everything that is on this HTML tag we now have access to. So if we go to our function up here, and if we do a var bg, we can do equals, and then we do our selector, so we do our $sign to select jQuery, our two parentheses, and inside there we're going to type in our selector, which in this case is data, so we're selected in this entire HTML tag. And then we're going to do .attr. attr represents attribute, so we are now grabbing the attribute that is on here, and we can specify whatever attribute that we want to grab, whether it's class, data-bg, data-font, etc. So I want to grab the background, so I'm going to do data-bg. Alright, and I also want to grab the font color, so I'm going to do font equals, exact same concept, so data.attr, and then just like we have here, data-font, I'm going to type in data-font, and let's for now just do an alert. So we're going to alert the two values that have come through, and to verify that these are the ones that we want. So we're going to do bg plus our two single quotes, just to put in a space in there, because we're going to add these two together, and then we're going to do font. So we got bg plus, and we're adding in a string value, so it's just going to have a space, colon, space, and then we're adding in the second variable that we created. So if we save this and refresh the page, click on here, and now it gives us the background color, which is hashtag 000, and the font color, which is purple. Now, if we created a few more buttons, so I'm going to copy this, paste this a few times, and let's change these colors. So for this, I'm going to do green, and I'll type in orange here, type in red, and then yellow, pink, and white. Alright, so I've passed in different variables or values into each of these different attributes. So I'm just going to call this black button, green, red, and pink. And I'll just remove that button right there. That's kind of redundant since it's obviously a button. Alright, refresh the page. Now we've got a bunch of different buttons here. So we've got black, green, red, pink. So if I click on green, passes in the green and orange values. Click on the red, passes in the red and yellow values. Click on the pink, pink and white, etc. So now, let's have a little bit of fun and set it up. So now, let's do our $sign, data, and then we're going to do .css. So we're going to insert some CSS onto the page based off what we're clicking on. And we're going to do our 2 curly brackets, just like we did here on our animate. And then here, we're going to specify background, colon, colon, and then I'm going to just type in BG. I'm going to do a comma, because each of our CSS statements are going to be comma separated. And then I'm going to do color, comma, or colon, I'm sorry. And then we're going to type in font. And we'll take out this alert statement. And now if we refresh it, click on here, now turns black with purple text, just like we've specified here. So we've got black here and purple. So the colors turns purple, the background turns black. So this one right here, we click here. Now it turns green with orange text. Green and then orange. Same here, so we've got our red background that we specified with yellow text. I'm going to click on the pink, and now we've got the pink background with the white text. So this can be pretty cool. Creating custom attributes can come in handy because you can use that to create custom widgets or just pass in and hold different types of values that you want to use when you're creating some type of functionality on your HTML document. And that's all accomplished by using the this statement, because this passes in everything that is being clicked on. So it gives us access to the class, to the data-bg, to the data-font, all that fun stuff. And then we can grab that attribute by doing the .attr and then specifying the attribute that we want to grab. All right, so let's add in a few other things that we want to do. So let's do another method, or jQuery method, on top of the .css. So the .css, that's giving us some functionality. But the great thing about jQuery is you can chain things together, kind of like a train. You've got all of your different train cars. Well, each of the methods can be chained one after another, as long as they're all assigned to a specific selector that we have specified. So I have a list of a few different ones that I want to cover. So we've already covered how to use the animate. So we've got the fade in, the fade out, and the fade toggle. So let's do fade out. So if we do period, fade dash, or fade out, then we save this, refresh the page, shrink this down to size, click on it. So the background changed, or the button changed to the colors we specified, and then it started to fade out, and then it disappeared completely. So click on it, you'll notice that they kind of fade out, and then they disappear. That's what the fade out function does. Now, between these different parentheses, we can actually specify a speed. So I'm going to do 2000. And then it takes 2 whole seconds for it to fade out completely. So if you just watch it, it slowly fades out. Or I can make the fade out speed so fast that we can't even hardly tell. So if I do like a 10, that's 10 milliseconds. So that's like super fast. Yeah, it's so fast we don't even really see, because it is really fast. And then if we do like really slow, so like 10,000, so that would be equivalent of 10 seconds. I mean, it's going to be going so slow you're hardly even going to be able to. Oh, make sure we save that, and then let's refresh this. All right, and if you watch it, it's going to slowly fade out. And then once it's completely disappeared, and then it's gone. All right, so the same thing with each of these. So with your fade out, fade in, your fade toggle, your slide down, slide up, slide toggle, or just toggle, all of these work the exact same way. If they're creating some type of animation, you can specify the speed of it. All right, so I'm going to just set it up so it's on its default speed by taking out the numbers there. Alright, so it's faded out. And what if I wanted to add in something that I want it to do after it's faded out? Well, to do that, we can actually do callback functions. Now, callback functions are functions that get called after one function has completed. Now, the fade out is a function or a method that has been set up on here. So now we can type in function, and then our two parentheses, and then our two curly brackets. You'll notice that is the exact same format as what we got here, except this function right here does not have a function name. It just has function, so it's very generic. But it only gets called once this right here completes. So now we're going to do a $sign, specify data, and then we'll do fade in. So click on here, fades out, then it fades back in. Alright, so that is a callback function, which can be handy, especially if you want to set something up that has to wait until something else completes. Alright, so let's cover how to do a show, or let's do fade toggle. Fade toggle is a really cool one as well. So let's do fade toggle. Well, fade toggle is only handy if you're not going to hide, if you're going to show or hide something that you're not clicking on directly. And the reason I say that is if you're clicking on a button that you have a fade toggle on, once it's completely gone, then you can't click on it to bring it back in. So what we're going to do is we are going to select something separate. So let's set this back to fade out. Going to hide this code. So previously I commented out one line of code by doing 2 forward slashes, which is a quick way to do one line of code. But if you want to comment out multiple lines of code, then we can do a / asterisk, and then go to the line where we want to end our comment, and then we can do an asterisk /. Alright, so what if we wanted to modify something specific when we're clicking on it? So let's set up a div. We're going to do div id equals we'll give it an ID of modify content. Now all a div is essentially a box that you can create in HTML, and you can give it any sort of format. A div, to be specific, represents division. Okay, and we're just going to type in hello world right in there. Alright, so we've got the hello world text showing up there. Now I don't want it so close to the buttons, so I'm going to format it. So we did an ID. So IDs, you would need to do a hashtag and then modify content, just like we've typed right here. And let's do a margin dash top of 50px, and then a font dash size of 30. Alright, so it pushes it down by 50 pixels, and then it makes the font size 30 pixels. Alright, now that we have something that we can manipulate as we click on these different buttons, let's do a $, our 2 parentheses, and our 2 single quotes, and instead of specifying data, we're actually going to select this ID. So we're going to do hashtag modify content. Now you'll notice that I used a hashtag modify content, so it's just like what's in your CSS. Whenever you're doing a selector in jQuery, essentially you just type it in the way you would in CSS to select an element. Okay. And then we'll do a fade toggle. Alright, so let's refresh this. So if I click on here, it fades it out, it's gone. Now if I click on it again, it fades back in. And now since all of these have the exact same function, I can click on any one of these to fade it in and to fade it out. Doesn't matter which one's being clicked on, because we have the on-click animate this on each and every one of these buttons. If we removed the on-click on here, then the one that we removed the function from would no longer do anything. So that's what the fade toggle does. You don't have to do any custom if statements, no custom JavaScript. It just automatically can tell whether it's been faded in or out, and then it does the opposite. Now the same thing can be done with the slide toggle. So let's do a slide. So we'll refresh it. So click here, and if you notice, it actually kind of slides up. And that's similar to the functionality of slide up, and then the slide down is where it comes back into view. So that is the slide up and slide down, all built into one by using the slide toggle. Now let's comment out this line of code temporarily. Let's copy this code that we wrote previously, and we're going to paste it right here. Alright, instead of doing fade out, we're going to do slide up, and then here we're going to do slide down. Refresh the page. I click on this. Oh, we got it set up so it's affecting the button, but yeah, I suppose that's what we want. So if you notice, it kind of slides up and then it slides back down. So the button starts to disappear, then it shows back up. And if we wanted to affect modify content, then we can do that as well. So we can just copy this right here, do our 2 single quotes, paste that in there, and then paste that here as well. Now if we refresh on it, it goes through and it slides it up and down. You'll also notice that the formatting that's happening on here is happening to this box because we have the .css on here. So we're giving this a background of pink, in this case, and a color of white. Or if we click on a different element, it will modify it accordingly. So that is how you use the slide down, slide up, and the slide toggle. The show and hide, it's similar to the fade, except it doesn't actually fade anything, it just immediately hides it or shows it. So, to give you an example of that, I'm going to delete this custom function we built here, and we're just going to do hide. So if I click here, it just hides the element. And once it's gone, and there's no way for us to turn it back on unless we created another button it has the functionality to show it. Or what we can do is we can do a toggle. So it just toggles it from view to the hide to show, essentially. Now this can come in handy when building a widget or whatever it is that you want to do. So we have covered how to use the animate method, how to use the fade in, fade out, fade toggle, how to use the show and hide, the slide down, slide up, slide toggle, and the toggle. These will probably be the ones that you'll use the most for different type of animations while doing different things. So those can come in handy quite a bit. A few other ones that you can do is we can actually modify like the text that's inside here. So let's go ahead and delete all of this, and this time we're going to actually use a different method. We're going to use .html, and we're going to say howdy. Alright, so we refresh it, we'll click on here, and it just changed the text to howdy. But what if we wanted to have a different phrase for each one of these buttons? So using the exact same knowledge that we've covered previously, we're going to create an attribute for that. So we're going to do data-text. And then we can type in whatever phrase that we want. So we can say John. Let's copy this, paste it onto these other buttons. I'll type in Henry here, Frank, and Joe. Okay, now we'll need to get that variable, or the value, from there, so we're going to do name, so var name equals, we'll use the data, because we're passing in the this value, so it gives us access to all of these different attributes. So we're going to do .htr data-name. And then in here, we can type in name. So we've got our variable name, and we're putting it right here. So let's refresh this. So I can, let's make sure, I did data-text for my attribute. So I'll need to make sure this is data-text here. So now I can click on any one of these buttons and it automatically switches the text that's inside there to what's being clicked on. And all of your different jQuery methods, effects, work the exact same way. If you'd like to learn how to use other jQuery methods, just Google it. There's a ton of them out there, and they can do all sorts of different things. But they follow this format. You got your selector, and then you specify the method that you want to call that does some type of action. And that concludes the tutorial for this assignment.